So today we're going to go on with reading music by interval. Now, some of the things we have to understand about reading music by interval, which really simplifies the process, especially for people like guitar players or people who've been playing by ear and are afraid to learn to read music. First of all, we have these things here called clefs. And in reading by interval, the clefs do not matter. You can just throw them away. They are not necessary. And we also have these things called key signatures, sharps up there and flats down here. Now they only serve the purpose of showing us where the number 1 is. Once we know where the number 1 is, those global sharps and those global flats can be tossed away as well. You do not have to carry 4 sharps in your head and decide every time you see a name of a note, add a sharp to it. That's too much left brain thinking. The nice thing about reading by number is it's a very right brain process. As you've seen so far, we've been drilling you to be able to recognize those interval distances with just your eye, and when you just let go and stop thinking, it just comes to you, and you can go very fast and have a high degree of accuracy. However, when you're reading music and there is no key signature, there are no sharps or flats, then the clefs tell us where the number 1 is. For instance, the top clef here is known as the Viola Clef, or also the alto clef, and it points to the letter name C. We don't need letter names because we don't use them. We only use them to get on the same page as other musicians or to talk their old language. But what it does is it always tells us where the number 1 or do is at. As a matter of fact, it's also called the transposition clef, and when I was a young man, very young man, I played French horn, and at the age of 4 and 5, when I was learning French horn, we play both in the treble clef and the bass clef on the French horn, and it was rather confusing, and then we learned what was called the transposition clef. And the nice thing I always liked about the transposition clef is it always points to the line that is the letter name C, or 1. So anytime you see that on a line, if it's on the middle line, for instance, of the staff, then it says that middle line is C, or the number 1. If, however, it's not going to be that, it will use the sharps or flats to move the number 1 to another location. The other clef here is called the bass clef, and the bass clef essentially is put on the number 4. So if all there is, if there's no sharps or flats and it's in the key of C, then the bass clef is saying this line right here is where the number 4 is at. And so you can just count down 4, 3, 2, 1 and find out what space the number 1 is on. This thing called the treble clef, or also known as the G clef, is the letter name G, just as this is the letter name F. This is G, or the treble clef. And the treble clef tells us where the number 5 is at. These numbers are only necessary when you are in what we call the key of C and there are no sharps or flats. So if you see this guy and there's no sharps or flats, it's pointing at 1. If you see the bass clef and there's no sharps or flats, it's pointing at the number 4. And if you see the treble clef and there's no sharps or flats, it's always pointing at the number 5 in the key of C, regardless of the name game. Okay? Now, if they're using sharps, however, the last sharp furthest to the right is always the number 7. If I erase this one, then that would be the number 7. And if I erase these two, then this would be the number 7. And if I only have 1, that would be the number 7. So the furthest to the right, that accidental will always be the number 7, whether it's on a line or a space. And with flats, the last flat furthest to the right is always the number 4, just like the bass clef. And if I am not using this, then that flat would be 4. And if we don't have these two, then that flat would be 4. So whatever line or space the furthest to the right flat is pointing at, that is where you'll find the number 4. So you can count down, or 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 5, 6, 7, 1, you can count up to find out where 1 or do is at. Now that's all you need to know in order to read by number. You ignore these, and you ignore these globally, entirely, once we figure out where 1 is. Now let's go to our drills. We've been doing these drills with odd cards and even cards. It turns out that if we are reading with the treble clef here, then this red line that I have going along the bottom could be one of 5 possible keys. This could be the key of E double flat. It could be the key of E flat. It could be the key of E. It could be E sharp, or it could be E double sharp. It can have any of these 5 names, and which name depends on the clef and the key signature. But the number 1 will always be on this line, and once we know that's where the line is, it doesn't matter what the name game is, we can throw that out as well. All we need to do is be able to recognize the interval distances from this position. Likewise, if it were in the bass clef, this would be called the letter G, and we could have G double flat, G flat, G, G sharp, or G double sharp. Doesn't matter. If this were the alto clef or the viola clef, then this line would be called F, and this would be either F double flat, F sharp, or F double sharp. Again, doesn't matter. This one location represents 5 keys, and what your eye sees is what it gets. Now we're going to do this mostly diatonically, and we're going to warm you up here by just showing you all the odd intervals will wind up being on lines. Just like when we were doing the 2 cards stacked, I said this stack over here is odd, this stack over here is even, and you had no problem telling them apart. Well, we have this advantage here right now. If I say this line, that line, that line, and that line are odd numbers, then it's really easy to figure these out. You can see that this is 1. You can see the distance here is a 5. You can see that distance is a 3, 7, 3, 7, 5, 7, 7, 3, 5, 1, 5, 1, 3, 1, 5, and 7. So knowing that this bottom line is 1, easy to see that's a 3, easy to see that from here to here that distance is a 5, easy to see from here to here that distance is a 7, because the lines are always odd numbers. Now, for evens, the rule is very simple. If the lines are odd numbers, then that means the even numbers are falling on the spaces. So in this case, every time you see a space, you can guess an even number, and again we go by that size, the eye bite. It's a second, it's a fourth, or it's a sixth. So you can see here, this is a second. You can see that is a sixth. That is a fourth, a sixth, a fourth, a second, a second, a sixth, a fourth, right? A sixth, a second, a fourth, a sixth, a second, a sixth, a fourth, and that's it. So easy peasy, right? Now when we mix them up, the thing that's going to tell you what's odd or what's even is if it's on a line, it's an odd number. If it's on a space, it's an even number. And knowing that in your mind ahead of time will help you guess these intervals. So let's take a look here. From this line to there is an odd number, 3. From here to there, it must be an even number, 4. From here to there, must be an odd number, 5. Even number, odd number, odd number, even number, odd number, odd number, even number, odd number, odd number, even number, even, odd, even, odd, and odd. So you see, 3, 4, 5, 2, 1, blah, 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 blah. Easy peasy. Now let's look at the ones down here and see if we can do them as quickly as possible to label these. This is 2, 4, 5, 7, 6, 4, 5, 3, 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 6, 5, 3, 6, 5, 4, 2, and 1. And you can see we just read, let's call this the key of E flat. We just read in the key of E flat. So it's just that simple. Next time we'll be using actual music in the key of E